everyone. So I know this is a session right after lunch. Most of you must be a little drowsy, but we have actually kind of talked about making it a little interactive. So we'll open up for questions in between the session itself. As Shyam rightly put it out, data is something which is inevitable right now, and your data strategy has to be pinpointed if you want to really get the maximum value out of data. And companies these days, like these three companies as well, and I was having a discussion before a session that companies these days, they know that they're sitting at a huge amount of data which is going unutilized, and they don't know how to actually monetize it. So this particular session, we'll actually try to get some nuances around how they are doing it and what are the challenges that they've tackled, and what is that exactly they have done to monetize data effectively. And if you look at it, right now, the data monetization is something which is, the conditions are really ripe. You have enormous data being generated through thousands and millions of apps all around the world. You have storage capacities growing enormously and at a very cheap cost. You have so many data analytics tools that are coming up every day, and technology is improving every day. So, but the challenge becomes as to how to really put in all these pieces together and come up with a strategy which is effective and giving you the most value. So I would like our panelists here to maybe in few words explain what exactly is the data strategy, and also tell us a little bit about what they do at their firms. So, Inigo, maybe.
Good afternoon. Audible? Good afternoon, everyone. And my name is Inigo. Been with Broadridge for 17 years now, and currently I head the data science practice in Broadridge. Brief about the data strategy. I think we started looking at data only 4 years back, but we always had data. We had data since 1962. That's when our business unit was born. Brief about Broadridge, because most of the use cases that I'm going to talk about needs a little bit of context on Broadridge's business, so please bear with me on that. Broadridge has two major businesses. One is we are in the securities processing, which means that most of the US-based and global, but predominantly US, the broker-dealers, investment banks, mutual fund companies, wealth managers, they're pretty much our clients in the sense they use our systems for post-trade mostly, right? So that's one part of the business. The second part of the business, which is the biggest of the two, is in the corporate governance space. And we have 3-digit market share in that. A little arrogant, but that's the truth. What is corporate governance? Corporate governance is every company that is publicly traded by regulation has to have an annual general body meeting, and they have to communicate with every single investor, even if you had one share. So 8 million shareholders of IBM needs to be communicated, but IBM can't do it. So Broadridge comes into picture. So the reason I give this example is because now you can talk about what kind of data we have. We touch every investor in the United States because we communicate with them on behalf of corporate, on behalf of all the corporate issuers. So that's the context of our business. Just to set a context on what kind of data we have about 200 petabytes. I don't even know how many zeros it has, but that's the number we have, right? Couple of minutes on the strategy. 4 years back, or about 5 years back, when we started to look at data, pretty much most of your companies, you will have multiple business units in your companies, right? Every business unit is either having a product or a solution sold, but data is always a byproduct. Data is generated, but it's never used. The first thing we did was we broke the silos and brought a one data strategy, which means the business units don't own the data anymore. The data was a separate strategy for us, a separate revenue line for us, separate owner was there, and then this is the first step towards establishing our data strategy, because without which the business units are not going to share the data, not because they don't want to, but that's not their priority, right? So that's the fundamental thing that we did as part of data strategy. A second thing is ingraining a little bit of data DNA or data culture in pretty much right from the developer all the way to the product managers. So I'm talking a little vague here, but I can give you an example. What I mean by data as part of the DNA is when you look at data, start looking at monetizing the data. Because stop looking at data as a byproduct and start looking at data as a valuable asset. So to that extent, right from our M&A team, this is part of our M&A strategy too. Normally M&A guys would look for how the clients fit in, how the financials fit in, how the technologies fit in. But as part of our data strategy, we also look at how the company to be acquired and their data fits with us. How is it an adjacency? So these are a couple of high-level strategic changes that we had to make 4 or 5 years back to earn our first dollar or monetize our data.
Sure, thanks, Inigo. So, by the way, 3 digits is also 000. Anyway, so yeah, I am Snigdha from ADP, and so ADP is automatic data processing. So, in a way, 60 years back, I can say that we were the original data company, right? So, anyway, jokes apart. What do? We are in the human capital management space, right? It's all about people. It's all about us. Our primary business is HCM. Besides being the product and technology head for HCM, we work a lot on data. So while we're talking about data monetization strategy, the way we went about it, a few years back, is we said we're sitting on huge amount of data for the last 60 years. People data, employee data, what do they do with their money, how much do they earn, where are they from, how far or close do they live from their office. So it's a humongous amount of data. Who's buying what benefit plan and so on and so forth, right? So we started thinking, what do we do with this data, right? And how do you monetize that data? We looked at 5 different pillars. So first we said, what is it that we can do with the existing data from our current product and solutions for our existing clients, right? So how do we make their lives as a user more enriching and save their time? Because again, time is money, right? And you help them do their basic tactical operations faster, they're going to spend more time on your product using your consulting or strategic initiatives. So first thing, we looked at every process flows. It could be a recruitment process flow, could be a benefits enrollment, and we said, what insights can I give them to help them make decisions faster, right? Can I help give insights, what kind of people to go and hire? From which sourcing company do you get the best Java executives, so the best Java architects? Can we help them screen profiles faster? So we started embedding insights into their workflows, right? The second thing, then we said, given that we have data across clients, what can we do to provide more incremental value and sell the data now, right? I mean, sell the value of the data. So second thing we came up with was benchmarks, right? So I can tell you how your processes are performing, but not only that, I can tell you what are others in a similar industry, similar job profile are doing, right? So let's say compensation. All of us are love to know how much am I making versus others, right? So it's HR's biggest problem to defend their stance, but more importantly, engage the talent, right? How much do I give this guy I'm hiring or this lady I'm hiring? So let's say I have my data. All of us have our company data. But what if I told you that tier 1 IT firms or product firms are giving this much range of compensation for this kind of profile? So that's what we do. We sell the benchmark or across client data, and we monetize that. Third aspect, we said, OK, great. Now we have done all of this for our current clients. What do we do in acquiring newer markets, right? So just extending the example of the compensation, we said we have the Hayes and the Tower & Watson who are actually selling compensation data. And that's great. How do they get their data? Many of us have participated in surveys as individuals or as leaders where we give them data, right? We take surveys with Hayes and Tower & Watson or Mercer's and tell them this is the range we are paying for this kind of profile. So that is information we are ready to declare. But what ADP has is real income data. You may go and say this is what you're paying, but I know how much you're actually paying to your employee, right? Because I'm actually paying out for them. So then we started selling these benchmarks to consulting firms. We actually expanded our market, right? And that's again monetizing data. Then we said, okay, what more can we do? Because then you start looking at extending the value chain, right? It's extending the market, but extending the value chain. And that's where we saw the marketplace video. What we said is, we will now go and open out our APIs. So for every transaction that a partner, a client, a competitor, including developers, if they have apps and they want some data, obviously we have a lot of due diligence and protocols, but they can actually use the data. And what do we get out of it? Again, money, right? Money for your data. Finally, what we have actually done is we have got into a space where we are saying, okay, you're thinking HCM because that's your domain, right? What you really need to do is see, can you get out of your business domain? And can you start thinking laterally? So we started challenging ourselves. We said we have data, aggregate data of businesses. We have aggregate data of employees. Now, if somebody comes to a real estate broker, let's say I shift to Bangalore, right? I'm from Hyderabad, and I say I want to lease or buy out a property. The real estate broker, for all you know, will actually show me certain kinds of property based on my range across Bangalore. What if we could give the real estate brokers information, similar profile like Snigdha? It could be community based on religion, language, social, economic, any of these profiles, right? What are the properties or the communities or the locations that you'll prefer to buy, right? So you can actually now go and help the real estate people do their business in a more efficient manner. So real estate, retail, where do you set up the high-profile stores, right? So that's the market that we have now tapped into. So these are the 5 dimensions that really define a data monetization strategy. There's something else we do to enrich a client experience, which I'll leave for later. So over to you, Ravi.
Hello, yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Am I audible? Sure. So I am Ravi. I lead the big data and analytics practice in Innominds. And interestingly, and kind of complementing them, I come from the services side. So we deal with data not just of ours, but of our customers. And a bit about Innominds. Innominds is roughly about 1/4 the age of the other 2 companies here. A little less in the case of Broadridge, and a little more in the case of ADP. So Innominds over these 15 years has helped build a lot of products. We did about 100 products, mostly in the high-tech space like databases, mobile solutions, mobile device management solutions, browsers, mobile browsers, security solutions, and so on. And we've also done solutions, using all of these technologies. And interestingly, we are on the intersection of all, about digital transformation from the point of view of data, security, user experience, and also cloud and devices, so connected devices. So that's what Innominds is about. And I'd make a small distinction here about between monetizing data and monetizing through data. So, there are 2 things, about monetizing data. One is about, selling data itself. And believe me, that's a big industry, $1 billion industry, and there are a lot of companies which do that. But I would actually like to, abstract it and say that monetizing through data is a little more than that. And I have seen, by being a service providers, businesses do a lot with data. For example, with data, new business models emerged, new businesses emerged, new services emerged, new products emerged, as well as new revenue models have come in and so on. So I would probably, subsequently go through some of the, examples of all of these, and quite interesting. And I'll also give you some, examples of some crazy things that people have done with data and so on. But I would like to just also, make a point here that, there has been talk that data is the new oil. And, in the 80s, predominantly, oil was what was driving the world's economy, and a lot of automation and industrialization and so on. And then, there is also talk about data is the new soil. So oil is, oil is more like, a natural asset, that you have. Soil is more representative of, the imagination and what you could do, because soil is, is the mnemonic here is for fertility there. But I would say is that data is not just oil or soil, but data is about who you are and what you want to do, you know. So data is the product or service, you know, ultimately, you know, that's what I would say what data can achieve. Right.
So you boil the data for insights.
Sure.
Some interesting points made. Snigdha actually reminded me of an app that's pretty much used in US. So in my recent trip, I was just visiting a friend, and he had a big house, like a huge mansion. And of course, the first question that comes to your mind is how much this guy is earning to have that kind of a mansion. But before that, you need to answer that how much this particular house would cost you. So like over dinner, I just asked him, you know, how much did you buy it for? And he says, I bought it for like 1.8 million, and 1.8 million US dollars. There's an app which can tell you about every house in US. Just go there, put in the address, and it can tell you the exact live price at which that house was transacted. So at the price that he actually bought it, that price was there live, and it's open data. And I could figure out that he's actually beefing up his price by $50,000 or $500,000. So actual price was pretty less. This is exactly what data is doing. Now this app has huge possibilities of monetizing through the amount of data that they are generating. So moving on, as you rightly put out, some of you are doing something really innovative in terms of putting one data strategy. So Inigo, how about you dwell more on it as to how you actually implemented that strategy and what were your challenges?
Yeah, adding on to the earlier point on one data strategy, having the data in one place, we call it data mart or data lake. That's one, because we want the visibility to every single data point that we have within our businesses. That was key, so that was achieved. It's a multiple bubbles that you would have seen in many presentations. It's a combination of having the right talent, right data brains. It's not about just knowing the algorithms on how to solve it, but ability to look for patterns and how can it be insightful to our customers, and how can the customers convert the insight into an actionable insight. Sometimes you can give insights, but that's like, okay. So the first step was building an ecosystem. The ecosystem included, pretty much most of us, when we started looking at data science practice, we started looking at recruiting data scientists. That's the first step. Let's recruit data scientists. But within like no time, we realized that's not it. So it needed multiple pieces to make this whole ecosystem work. One was having the engineering guys, engineering as in knowing the engineering behind the big data, may it be speed, may it be volume. We needed somebody who understands the engineering. Then we needed guys who are math plus computer science brains, who can crack the latest algorithms. So that was second. That was not enough too. I'll give you an example. We had one of the best data scientists work for us. We gave the data to him. He worked on it for 3 months and came back with a really good insight from the data. And the insight was presented to me and my boss. It was just an equation which said something equal to 1 by log of e plus 2 power whatever something. So, business guys were sitting there. It's a great insight. I know for sure if I dig deeper, we will know what insight he has. But at the end of the day, he produced an equation which had no sense. So that's where the storytelling and visualization, part of the data science had to be added to this ecosystem. So we invest a lot in visualization and data science. And visualization is not just graphical representation of the data. It's much more to it. Maybe for another topic, but it's an art by itself. So that was part of it. And the fourth one, another example of the same group of data scientists. After 3 months. Just a background, the proxy season in the US is between March, April, and May. Proxy is the annual general body meetings that happen, and that's where bulk of our data comes. So it's concentrated around the March, April, May time frame, right? We know it. We've been in that business for 50 years. We know it that it's going to happen in around the 3 months. Now, when we gave the data to the data scientist, after 3 months, he comes back and says that, you know what, there's a voila moment that I found, and most of your meetings happen in the month of March, April, and May. Now, we didn't have to shell thousands and thousands of dollars to just know that, right? So this is where the business involvement was needed. We can't just leave the data scientists to do things on their own. So we needed to add the subject matter experts, the people who with business acumen needed to be added to the ecosystem. And the last one is more of micro decisioning, what we call it as micro decisioning. It's been introduced as a terminology these days. Micro decisioning is not about just giving business inputs, but course correcting every insight that comes out of it on a pretty much regular basis. So, the shorten the cycle time of an algorithm to insight, writing an algorithm, take the insight, take a micro decision right then and there, so that the data scientists don't waste time, going in a wrong direction. So these are some of the constructs that we put in to build an ecosystem that can go forward with supporting the data strategy. The other thing we did, right, was many times we look at the data coming from a business unit and sell it back to the clients, right? I think Snigdha spoke about peer benchmarking. That's pretty much what we do too. Peer benchmark, you be part of our network, we sell it back to you. But that was not enough, because pretty much most of the clients had a good sense of what others are having from a peer benchmark perspective. So you really needed to give much more than that. That's one. So from a monetization perspective, we started to look at different clients. Take data from this clientele, but you don't necessarily need to sell it back to them. A broker-dealer's data was more insightful to a wealth manager than to a broker-dealer himself, because he knows it. So this is another thing that we introduced, start looking at outside the business unit to be able to sell the data. So data from one business unit is probably relevant to somebody else.
All right. So as we can see, there are a lot of challenges in the entire process of data monetization, and Inigo's firm has tried to do something around it. But then apart from this, there are a lot of legal challenges. There are a lot of data security and privacy issues, especially in a financial services kind of a firm. In fact, in ADP as well, there's a lot of personally identifiable information. They have all your salary data. They know how much you're earning, like each one of you here. And this obviously brings to a point where you have to do something around it to be able to actually monetize it. Microsoft recently, for data security, I don't know how many of you would know, but they recently had opened a data center under the seabed, on the seabed. So Pacific Ocean, right on the seabed, they have a data center, which I don't know how secure it is, but their analysts believe that it's going to be really secure under that. And nobody knows where exactly in Pacific Ocean that is. So which basically brings us to a point that how would you actually tackle those challenges? So if Snigdha, you can.
Sure. So very valid examples. One is legal. So when we use somebody's data, any client's data beyond that client, as I talked about the benchmarking, we actually get a legal consent form to be signed by the client. So if you want the benchmark, you want to use some of our models that are driven by the benchmark, given that you're using PII information, right? That's personal information. So that was a little easier to solve. The thing that we learned the very hard way in few cases, so we had this absence prediction model that we were building, right? And everybody was super excited. So we follow a very thorough design thinking process. We do a lot of user research. So all the users we talked to, especially in the retail space and medical industry, they were super excited because their costs and contracting labor are very high, right? So they would like to be on top of it. So we looked at all the data, and we got interesting insights. Certain people in a certain age group who we assumed have school-going children, right? We saw that during the vacations, during the holidays, they were taking a lot of leave. Then we saw gender patterns, right? We didn't know that this is the kind of data that you cannot share even in terms of insights. So it can't be explicable, right? You can't connect it back to gender. Something that came to our minds were, certain communities, and we saw the trends in data, certain communities were taking holidays during their religious or, spiritual events. So we were super excited about the model, saying that's, going to get us big money people wanted. But then we were told that you're not allowed to, your US laws prohibit you from using such specific information, even if it's aggregated, that's discriminatory, right? So there are regulations that stop you from doing that. So it is a learning process, but to your point, legally, We do have lawyers actually telling us what data can be used, what kind of consents to give. The security, the data privacy laws that you're talking about, which probably led Microsoft to do that. Yes, so we have multiple data centers, one in Europe, one in the US. We do not share transactional specific data across boundaries. What we do is aggregated information, though, can be shared. So that's, we have a lot of masking and aggregation that's done before we can share the insights.
So basically, what I can sense is that you are collecting a lot of data, but what I feel is in the quest of collecting all this data, you would definitely decrease the user experience. You would in some way affect the customer experience. So how do you tackle with that?
Actually, in fact, I would say, Vaibhav, it's reverse, right? Because what we have done is we've used a lot of the operational data. So if you look at it, I'll just take 2 examples maybe. Go back to the recruitment example, which is, something we're all familiar with, right? All of us, I'm sure, have applied for at least one job. So during the recruitment process, we have our own recruitment processes, right? It is typically a few steps that a candidate has to fill in their profile. And a lot of US and international laws mandate you to collect certain amount of information. When we rolled out a feature, right, a whole recruitment product, clients were super happy, right? So if you let them define mandatory questions, there were some clients who were so excited they went and defined 50 mandatory questions. They said it'll help screening, right? You can screen off the unwanted profiles or candidates. Great, we launched the product and we started getting a lot of negative feedback from the client. Since we started using ADP product, we don't see enough candidates to interview. The drop rate is very high. And that kind of got us thinking. We looked at all kind of patterns. We looked at annualized patterns. We looked at industry patterns. Is recruitment, is employability going down, and so on and so forth. And we still couldn't figure out why that particular client's drop rate was going down. How are the revenues? What is it? We really racked our brains. Then we said, okay, let's go and figure out what's happening. We went to the operational data, right, that we collect on Google Analytics or on Splunk logs. And we started seeing that there was something very interesting. Around the second step of that application, candidates were dropping out, right? Then we said, oh, wow, this particular client has gone and defined 50 mandatory questions. So, it's so intuitive, right? Would you really sit and answer 50 mandatory questions and say, forget the job, I don't want it? Then we said, okay, let's go to the other clients' data of similar industry. And we saw, some people had just defined the 5 compliance questions. So that actually gave us an opportunity to not only enrich the client experience, but give them cues through the process, how many questions is favorable based on the benchmark data. But we also started seeing that as a huge opportunity for us in future to do consulting, right? Actually advise clients how to set up the recruitment process to screen better, but more effectively. So.
Thank you. So Ravi, you must have heard their points, and you being a service provider and they being more of a product company, I can definitely see that you might not be facing the same kind of challenges as they do. So what is your take on it? What's your nuance?
To the contrary, being a service provider, we face even more of a challenge because we deal with, 2 of the most feared words, one of which is outsourcing, and 2 of which is offshoring. So for those 2 reasons, and for we being a third party at the end of the day, we do face that challenge. But I believe that the challenges on the legal and the the privacy, confidentiality, while they're being there and not trivializing them, the harder challenge for monetizing through data is essentially related to what to do with the data and what value to get out of the data. I've often seen businesses invest quite a bit in in the infrastructure, in the technologies, to store, process, and analyze data, but not have been, that effective in actually using the data to work. ADP and Broadridge have done some wonderful things. That's why they're the leaders in those spaces. But I don't think, it's the same is true for every company there. And that's where we, come into the picture. And one of the things is while we do the plumbing, we also, ensure that these, the projects that we do from an analytics point of view have enough return on investment and things like that. And often, that's where, he did, allude to the point that data science is not just about, doing the analysis and preparing the data, fitting an algorithm and getting some output out of it, right? So it is also about in what business context can this be applied, and, and what kind of value can be obtained from, that kind of project as well. So we do have the challenges from a privacy and legal point of view, but at the end of the day, I think by proving that the data that they have is worth much more than what they have already, got, that's how we win projects. And often that involves, some imaginative thinking, and, that's the challenge that we have, that can we do that in all the domains that we serve and so on.
Well, these guys here, they would say, we don't want to provide you data. What would you do in that case?
Yeah, so one fortunate thing is that not all data is PII. So for example, there is a lot of machine data. There is a lot of logs, network logs. So we go and then, go after those use cases saying, fine, let's look at all of your IT infrastructure. And I'm sure you're collecting all the information, from routers, from network elements, from systems, and so on. That's not, that confidential data. Let's look at some use cases like threats. Let's look at some use cases like advanced persistent threats, which are much harder to find and, and therefore remediate. So we then go after those use cases, and once we kind of prove the value, it also becomes a little easy for them to then probably share much more data than that. And we also, as a service provider, we ensure that we are compliant, we are ISMS compliant, we do have the processes, the checks and balances, and also the technology to ensure that the data is safeguarded, as much as possible. And also, from a people point of view, also we sensitize the people, and we, sort of talk about, the care that we must all take, of, our customers' data as well.
It's interesting you bring that, Vaibhav, because our biggest threat, I think, within ADP and, being part of the data science initiative is about not letting these data science experts come into the organization. Two reasons, right? Because it's such a hype, and I wouldn't say it a hype, I mean, it's such a real money-making, initiative for the company. You don't want to let outsiders get into your strategic initiatives, right? And definitely forget the PII data. It's not a security threat. I wouldn't want to give data away because it's giving money away, right? I wouldn't like people to have access. So for us, actually, we do not want to consult with the third party.
You want to throw them out of business?
I'm not really worried about their business. I'm just worried about not getting them. And the second point is, I think, while we can talk about all this data monetization, I think I'll just allude to Inigo's previous point, right? Culturally, it's so important that each and every employee can think of data as an asset, because you cannot have this one vertical that is thinking of what data will be valuable. And in each and every developer, each and every engineer, product manager, to think about how our data could be used in terms of giving insights to enrich client experience, right? So everybody has to be a data thinker or a data evangelist. So we spend a lot of money training people, and it's pretty much of the plan that we'll get the whole organization sensitized on value of data. So these two really are reasons that we keep away from most of the experts.
Sure, but I'm sure you'll see that, for example, you opened up the marketplace and you're letting in developers to play with the data that you have and then make some value out of it. So I think organizations do realize that there is the power of the ecosystem, which is much more than what an organization can do by itself. And I'm sure people start off saying that this is my prized asset, and this is how I will probably stay competent and relevant. But I think they'll realize that over time they wouldn't be able to do all of it by themselves, and that's when they'll look out as well.
I would completely agree. I mean, as consulting firm, we want the data to be open.
And I want to be called back a second time to speak, so I'll rest my case. But I think, that talks a lot. The video talks a lot about transactional data versus giving data away.
So I think we can open up for a few audience questions. We have a few minutes left. Who, I mean, you're asking to Ravi? How ethical is what she's doing? But it's anonymized. It's anonymized.
Okay. So we as a firm really have very strong ethics, but that's about ADP. About the question specifically, the first one, you are advised by your company not to share your data. Here we are not sharing any specific person's data. We are profiling people, we are profiling businesses and sharing aggregates. So what I'm going to tell you is what, let's say again, the compensation world, you know, an engineer with this kind of competency, with this kind of performance, demands a compensation between this range in the market. And that's not really unethical, right? I mean, we are all our HRs are going and getting that data. The second question, actually, I don't. We don't do surveys, though. We've not yet started doing surveys, but surveys are for collecting data. So I'm not sure if that is unethical. I mean, we all.
Next time you should give him a goodie, actually.
Give him a goodie?
Yeah.
Give him some data?
Yeah.
Okay, sure, I'll do that.
So we had another question there.
Yeah, hi. I got a quick question.
We'll take that one and then maybe this one. Yeah.
Hi. Hi guys, I'm Yogendra from Zinnov. So I think Ravi raised a great point around data revenue and how much value is that giving to the company. So can you guys share what is your revenue share from data services currently as a percentage of your total revenue? That's my first question.
Of Innominds?
From Broadridge and ADP.
Yeah, Broadridge, it's a $100 million business for us in the last 2.5 years. And we are a $2.5 billion, $2.8 billion company now.
Sure.
So that's the.
And ADP, how much would that be?
ADP, okay, so ADP, there are two things that we're doing. One is the business initiatives which I talked about, real estate and retail. That's going to get launched in August, September. So that's the new markets. We don't have any revenues yet. On our existing data cloud products, where we have predictive, descriptive, prescriptive, we are around $30–40 million. Of course, I mean, actually, this can go into a topic by itself. Every quarter, we actually relook at a monetization strategy, because sometimes you want to get it tested by the clients, and we land up giving it free. And sometimes you want to sell it, right? So we keep changing the billing model, or we keep reviewing it and changing it, maybe depending on how the adoption is and a lot of various other parameters, but it's around those few tens of millions.
Sure. Second question is, as much as I appreciate that, you guys are leaders in your respective industries, but you guys are not the leaders in, let's say, data monetization as a strategy. And let's say sooner than later, a Google or a Microsoft or let's say an Apple is going to come after you in your industry. So any strategies around that? How you're going to mitigate that risk from these biggies?
I'll take this. Yeah. So I think I forgot to mention one of the first points that I wanted to share today is who owns the data. The data strategy can, like I think he mentioned about monetizing through data versus monetizing data. We are in the monetizing data space because we own the data. So not only us, any company that owns data, they have an edge over others in terms of monetizing them. Because when they stop the gates, the others are only algorithm makers, looking for patterns and monetizing it. So the key here is who owns the data. I think they get to monetize it. So Google, if they get into this business and they, as a result, eat our core business market share, then they can talk about monetizing data and eating up our market share in the data space. But as long as, like I mentioned, 200 petabytes of data, we know every investor in the world, in the US, we know every investor's every position in that they own, what do they buy, what do they sell, how much do they buy, how frequently they buy. So that kind of data is not available pretty much with anybody. Everybody has pockets of data, but the entire data is with us.
So you're saying that unless the company or let's say Google enters your industry through acquisition, it's tough to really be a leader in this space in your industry.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
I think Ravi would disagree to your point of just algorithm makers.
Yeah, I mean, as a data scientist myself, I do get humiliated, several times. But I just, I just listen to it and try to prove a point when I get a chance.
So we'll have one last question, and then you can. Yeah.
My question is, I'm Valli from Ingersoll Rand. My question is, when you start this big data projects, you will have a clearly defined product requirement, or we have a bunch of data, let's get started and see if we can make some sense out of it. What is the right way of doing it?
Okay, so on that point, most of the data projects are exploratory in nature with no defined use cases to start with, at least in our space. Okay, but there is a phase where the exploration will start to taper down and the crystal clear use cases will arrive, and we value those. We do valuation on those use cases as to what is our highest priority, what's going to bring more value, and that's how the use cases evolve, not the other way where we react to a particular use case. The reaction to use cases also happens, which is more supervised in nature, where the business comes and tells us that this is what we want, this is the data you have, come back and tell us. This is where one of the challenges I wanted to mention earlier, we spoke about legal challenges. The other challenge that we face in the point that you made is when business wants a particular thing to be done using data, they don't care whether you use data science or you put 200 people looking into the data. So that's the challenge. So they need it in the next 4 days. But to be able to look into patterns, petabytes of data, patterns from it, devise the most efficient algorithm, you need, let's say, 3 months. That's where the tension between the business need and the predefined use case versus using data science to achieve a predefined use case comes into picture.
Ravi, do you want to?
You want to add?
Yeah, so I think as a service provider, that's often our first challenge, that we don't have enough say sponsorship from the business on what kind of use cases they wanted to pursue and so on. And yeah, like Inigo said, it is often initially data mining to just go abstract and start exploring the data and get a feel for the data and to just get a sense of what's that and what kind of patterns emerge out of data. But very soon, I think, and depending on the maturity of the business and also the abilities of the data scientist, it converges, pretty quickly to a specific use case, and then I think the real work starts of, stitching together that use case, and then also, the data acquisition, the data processing, the algorithm fit, the predictions, and then of course, checking, how well those predictions are doing. So I think it is largely the maturity of the business and the competence of the data scientist that determines, how soon that happens actually.
Snigdha, before you start,
Yeah,
a
sure.
very, very quick 30-second ending note.
Sure,
We are running
absolutely.
short
I just
time,
want to
yeah.
say ours is the reverse. We have so much of opportunity and use cases identified, and our chief data scientist is sitting next to you. You can probably have an offline conversation. But for us, we have so much of opportunity, both in new market and the existing market. I think just sitting and exploring data to find out patterns and potential use cases, we're really short of time. So, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. I think all of you must have got some insights into what these companies are doing and what are the key challenges, and probably you'll try to see in each of your firm what you can do in future.